Welcome all to New Perspectives and Transformation of the Body series, which is intended to help us better understand the fundamentals of integral yoga and its approach to the evolution of consciousness and the future of material manifestation. As many of you know, New Perspectives is being hosted by Aru University in Surat, India, and Sri Aurobindo Integral Life Center in Surat and here in Fountain Inn, South Carolina. I'm Rade. I'm the Executive Director here in Fountain Inn, and I am joined by Dr. Vladimir Yatsenko, Director of our Institute of Applied Research in Integral Studies, who will be facilitating the webinar. And of course, we also have with us here today Dr. Rammanohar, who welcome very much. Dr. Rammanohar will address Ayurveda's perspective of the body as a temple. And interestingly, when we reached out to him and asked if he would address this topic, he wrote back that although we often speak of the body as a temple, in fact, he says that the structure of the temple itself is inspired by the body and its three dimensions of the physical, subtle, and casual body. So we're very much looking forward to his talk today. And again, we'd just like to welcome you, Dr. Rammanohar, to New Perspectives. So just a brief background. We have hosted him before, so many of you are familiar with him, but he is the research director of Amrit Center for Advanced Research in Ayurveda. He has been contributing in the field of Ayurvedic research for the past 30 years and has spearheaded many important research studies in the field and published over 100 articles, including research papers in peer-reviewed index research journals. He's traveled widely in many countries, including here in the US, Canada, Great Britain, Russia, Thailand, Singapore, and all for the promotion and discussion of Ayurveda. So before turning it over to Dr. Rammanohar, just a reminder to please post any of your questions in the Q&A box rather than the chat box. And towards the end, he will be taking your questions, as many as we can get to. So with that, let me turn it over to you, Dr. Rammanohar.
Thank you so much, Radhe, Vladimir. I'm very honored to have been invited for this event and very happy to be here again. And I thought this was a very interesting topic of the body as a temple. And we will just look at this perspective from the Ayurvedic viewpoint, you know, how Ayurveda has looked at the body. And in fact, as was just mentioned, from the Ayurvedic, are you able to hear me? Okay. Yes. So I was just saying that, you know, from an Ayurvedic point of view, we think that by comparing the body to a temple, we make it sound more sacred. But many of us may perhaps, even I realized it is in one, you know, flash of light in my mind, oh, that actually the temple was really inspired by the body. I mean, it's because the body is sacred that the temple has also become sacred. So this is the theme. Although we are talking today about how to look at the body as a temple, I'm just turning the whole thing around by saying that actually the temple is a representation of the human body. And we'll just go through a very quick journey of Ayurvedic texts and the philosophy behind the emergence of this whole idea of the temple in Indian culture, which is also, you know, constructed in a very sophisticated manner. There are architectural rules. You just cannot construct a temple. It's based on elaborate rules and design. And as we explore that design, we will realize that it represents what we see and what we do not see of the complex human personality. So with these opening words, I'd like to share slides. Of course, I didn't make too many slides, just so that, you know, our whole discussion follows a structure and we don't get lost. I have a few slides to share. So in a moment, I'll get there. Yeah. So I hope the slides are visible now.
Yes, they are.
Sorry. So this is our topic today, Ayurveda's view of the body as a temple of the spirit. So, of course, this first slide I already mentioned a little bit. We have come to become used to thinking about the body as a temple, and when we want to change our view of the human body, there are two views from a spiritual perspective. The body is, destructible. It's temporary, and so it's the spirit, that survives and that is, long lived, that is eternal. So even in spirituality, like in the yoga tradition, even in the Patanjala Yoga Sutras, there is a reference to, you have to bathe your body every day. It is a bag of dirt. It is, just a Panchamahabhutas. So we can see these two perspectives in the Indian tradition, that on the one hand, we look down at the body as an obstacle in our spiritual journey or evolution, and that it is something which has to return to the five bhutas, and if we identify too much with the body, that is actually serving as an impediment in spiritual growth. This is called as dehatma buddhi. If you think you are the body, then you are done for. So while this is also a concept, in my opinion, that has been very misunderstood. I mean, this is not a denouncement of the human body, and that is where Ayurveda comes in. I mean, what we are talking about when we talk about the body in a negative sense is just this, that don't limit your identity to that of your physical body. It doesn't mean that you have to give up, that aspect of our existence. It doesn't mean that we have to dismiss our physical existence. It only means that we shouldn't limit ourselves to our physical existence. And that is where the idea of the body as a temple acquired significance. Without rejecting the body, we use it as a tool, we accept it, embrace it. And when we realize it is capable of transforming us to a higher realm of existence, it no longer becomes just the Panchamahabhutas. That is the symbolism of a temple also. It is non-living. I mean, it is made of only the bhutas. It is the most grossest material on earth that we use to construct a physical temple, but it's a tool to take us to the most subtle, the most refined, experience of consciousness. So that is the paradox that we see in human existence. We are trapped inside this physical frame, which is derived from the Panchamahabhutas, which really limits our consciousness through the sense organs. It limits our world of experience, but still it is the tool with which we can transcend it. So there's no question of giving up the body. So all this idea in spiritualism, I think this is very much reflected in many of our spiritual traditions, including Buddhism, where Buddha also at one stage was really torturing his body, and then he realizes that will not lead him anywhere. I'm sure many of us have seen the Buddha's self-tortured body, just a bag of skin and bones. It's also, displayed in many places. That was an experiment that Buddha conducted. And even in Ayurveda and in the Upanishads, we have a lot of instances where people try to, starve the body, thinking that, it is by getting rid of the body that we can liberate ourselves. And there is a big no to this approach. Even the Bhagavad Gita says, uh, Yuktahara viharasya. If you don't take proper food, Yukta nidras, if you don't have proper, sleep, Yukta swapnava bodhasya. If you don't sleep well and wake up at the right time, then for such a people, yoga is not effective. So this is the context, where even though we understand the limitations of the human body, when you look at the body as a temple, suddenly our perception is completely transformed. We realize that it has limitations, but also the potential to take us to a higher level of experience, a higher level of our own consciousness. So the body, whether the body becomes an impediment in this process of self-transformation or a facilitator, or it just depends on how we look at the body and how we make use of it. So it's not the body itself which is to be blamed, but our own perception of what the body is. So I think this is very, very important to be clarified. And this is the position that Ayurveda takes, When we talk about the limitations of the body, it only means our identification with the body alone as the basis of our being. This is called as Dehatma Buddhi. And when we come out of that, don't throw the baby with the bathtub. Don't throw away the body. Don't torture it. Don't ignore it, because it is still the tool for your liberation. So this is the whole idea that our temple culture has also to be trying to convey, because we tend to not understand. So the temple is just like a kindergarten where we are taught about how to make use of our body. This is the thing. A temple is just a place where you go to learn that we are more than our body. And you go through different steps, different rituals in the temple. It's like actually going inside. I had always wondered, when you go to any temple, you go inside the sanctum sanctorum, it's so much of effort. Many Indian temples are so crowded. And the moment you get in front of the deity, you are asked to close your eyes. So at one moment, I thought, what a stupid thing. I've taken all this trouble and effort to get into this sanctum sanctorum, to have a glimpse of the deity. And now I'm not allowed to keep my eyes open. I have to look inside, I have to close my eyes. So this is a clear indication that in the temple we are being taught how to introvert our minds, how to look inside our own selves. So what we see in the temple when we enter into the sanctum sanctorum, we are actually turning ourselves inside and looking into the deeper levels of our own being. So the temple is a place where we learn the basic lessons of what our body is and how to make use of it to facilitate our physical body. So, if we reverse the phrase body as a temple to temple as body, then I think we can have a transformative experience. So, our discussion today, with the permission of the organizers, is not body as a temple, but temple as body. So now, if you come to the Ayurvedic text, the human being is described as a three-dimensional entity. This is what Ayurveda is always emphasized, that we are not just the body. There's something more to it than the body. So these three components are also sometimes referred to as bodies itself, so that we get the idea that something which is not concrete, we are not able to identify with. So instead of saying that there's something beyond the body, we say that we have three bodies instead of one body. Now, that's a very clever way of making us think about something beyond the physical. That's how I think that language and usage also came. So if you say there is body, there is mind, and there is self, again, it's a bit difficult to relate when you are living in a very, gross world. So when you say you have actually three bodies, then you begin to think about, oh, I have a very, very gross body, and inside that is something a little bit more subtle, and even inside that there is something a little bit more subtle. So this is the way we are first introduced to the complexity of this apparatus that we have in the whole tool in which we have embodied ourselves. So these three components are not only they are called as bodies, they also have specific terms. In Sanskrit, we sometimes call them as the gross body, the subtle body, and the causal body, the sthula shariram, the sukshma shariram, and the karana shariram. And if you look at Ayurveda, Ayurveda has drawn from various darshanas. It is actually a kind of very open system. I mean, it does not advocate itself to one single view. It tries to present the human being in all its complexity and tries to synthesize the different viewpoints that have emerged, through this whole process of understanding our own existence. So in an essence, I can say that what Ayurveda is trying to tell us is that our beings are complex, or if you don't want to use the word complex, because it's also a relative term. Sometimes when you understand it in the right sense, it actually becomes simple and not complex. So the idea that we are multidimensional. So in Charaka Samhita and Sushruta Samhita, embodied person is said to be composed of 24 or 25 principles, subcategorized into many specific categories. And Prakriti and Purusha are also two categories, used following the Sankhya system to describe the human persona in Ayurveda. We have also the Panchakosha model from the yoga tradition. I'm sure we are all aware of it. But Ayurveda does not mention it directly.
But to summarize, what I'm trying to say here is that the whole idea is that we are more than the physical body, and the whole question is how do we become aware of those dimensions of our existence, and how do we transform our experiences to become aware of those deeper layers of our personality. This is the goal of Ayurveda. This is the goal of Ayurvedic treatment also, because that is why our medicines are also called as aushadham, that which causes a burning transformation, a receptacle of a burning transformation that helps us to express a higher consciousness. So this is how Ayurveda looks at the human being. And now I want to come to the point. I mean, we have about an hour, so I want to get right into the heart of the matter. We are talking about what is relevant for us is to know how Ayurveda has looked at our personality using two terms, Kshetra and Kshetrat. These are two interesting Sanskrit terms, very relevant for our discussion today. So, Kshetra is a word with many meanings in Sanskrit. It's variously translated as the field, the house, the soil, or a department of action, a field of action, a place of origin, or even a fertile soil. We call even a paddy field as a kshetra in Sanskrit. So its meaning is very, very contextual. But what is interesting is that this same word kshetra is used to refer to the body as well as the temple, which is also our discussion. So we need to know why this word kshetra has such varied, connotations. And if we get to the heart of that matter, then we will be in a better position to understand this whole concept. And now we have kshetratnya. So when you look at the human being, we divide our whole experience into these two domains very broadly, kshetratnya and the kshetra. We have the kshetra, which is the field of our action and experience, and then we have the kshetratnya, who's the witness or the knower of this field of experiences. So here we mean the knower of the body. So what I want to discuss a little bit is what is so special about this word kshetra? Why did it become a common term to denote both the body and the temple? The body has many other terms in Ayurveda, like Kalevaram, Deha, Sharira, Kaya, but none of those terms also mean temple. Only the word kshetra, which is used for the body, is also used to indicate a temple. And then, as I said, this word kshetra has many other meanings. Now, when we try to stitch all these meanings together using a little bit of Sanskrit derivation of a word, then I think we'll get a very beautiful insight. So what is kshetra? So kshetra in Sanskrit is derived from this phrase, chayad trayate. Chaya means decline, to waste and wither away. And trayate means to protect. So kshetra actually means something which protects us from decline. So when you call a paddy field as kshetra, it means from that paddy field we get rice, and rice sustains human life. So it prevents society from disintegrating or declining. When you say kshetra is a field of your action, it means that is a place where you grow in your own profession, in your career, and that prevents you from declining. So wherever the word kshetra is used, as you can see here, field, house, soil, fertile soil especially, place of origin, it all means that, that entity which we are referring to as kshetra prevents us from declining or disintegrating. On the other hand, it also prevents us from growing or transforming. So that is the meaning of the word kshetra. So kshetra is that which protects from decline. So wherever this word is used, this is the meaning. And then we can understand why the word kshetra is used for so many things. Sometimes in English, I'm sure this kind of characteristic may be there for many of the classical languages in different parts of the world. There were more congruity between the word, its derivation, and the meaning it represented. But sometimes in English, you have no reason why something is called by a certain term. But classical languages like Sanskrit, you can see this. And so, in order to understand the deeper meaning of a word, it's not enough to get a translation. You have to go to the root of the word, understand what that root actually means, and then suddenly you will realize why it means so many things, why one word can denote so many things. There is a common thread of understanding of that meaning which connects all these terms together. So in Ayurveda, the body is called as a kshetra because it serves as a tool for the evolution of the self. Because the body is a tool for transformation. It prevents the decline. That is what the body is trying. Even as the body is something, according to Ayurveda, which burns to expand the mind and liberate the self. So the body is actually doing a great sacrifice so that it enables, it transmutes our consciousness. Only when the body burns, we are able to transmute our consciousness to a higher level of experience. So the body, according to Ayurveda, itself is a yajna, or it's a sacrifice. You can see this idea in the Purusha Suktam also. Abhadran Purusham Pashum. So this body is like a pashu or an animal that is in the sacrifice, and it is through that sacrifice of the body, which here actually means the whole transformation that the body goes through. The body itself declines, but in the process, it helps the mind to grow and reach consciousness, or attain that higher level of consciousness. So the mind is in an upward trajectory and the body is in a downward trajectory. This is what Ayurveda says. The body in the young age, the body is kapha, growing. It is growing in the middle age, it is pitta, it is burning. And in the old age, it is vata, it's already declining. And what Ayurveda says is that if you use the body correctly, in the mind, it is opposite. When you are born, you are tamasic. Everybody is crying, 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 sleeping. This is what a baby does. From a physical point of view, the body is so robust, its immune system is so robust. We know with COVID, young children are generally recovering very well. Both my children got COVID twice, and they recovered without much problem, and in spite of not being vaccinated. But many of the older people, in spite of vaccinations, they have had to suffer a lot. Generally, of course, there are children also who have compromised immune systems who may react severely to COVID. We have also seen this multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children. But generally, the children's body is physically more robust. Their minds are tamasic. And when they enter into adolescence, teenage, they become rajasic. And now they become rebels. Even they turn against their own parents. They want to become independent. And in the third phase, actually, we have a possibility of our mind evolving into a state of sattva, of complete maturity and evolution. But this, while tamasic, the change from tamas to rajas happens automatically. The process of the mind changing from a rajasic to a sattvic state requires our participation. If we don't do it consciously, we know that we have childish people in an adult's body. We don't grow up. This is the problem with the human life. For a cow, if a cow becomes physically mature, it's also mentally mature. I mean, there's no further maturity. A cow doesn't look into the mirror and think whether I'm beautiful today or whether I must do a haircut. This is a real human predicament. Our mind is in a constant conflict. So while we move out of tamas and rajas, sometimes if we don't kickstart this process of mental evolution, then we decline with our own body. And that is the warning that Ayurveda gives. If you don't identify yourself to something beyond the body, you cannot use the body as a tool to elevate or liberate yourself. So the body is something that burns to, and gets destroyed. But in that process, it creates that momentum or the trajectory for the mind to, so we consider in Ayurveda, the body is like a diving board for the mind. And as the body transforms, as it gives us that physical energy, we must use that to push our mind and jump into the higher world of consciousness. So this is called in Ayurveda as body is the tool to perform karma or dharma. This was so popular in our tradition that even poets like Kalidasa, used to say, Sharira Madhyam Khalu Dharma Sadhanam. Know that this body is the tool for dharma. Without the body, you cannot do dharma. Without dharma, you cannot purify your mind. And without, processing your mind, you cannot manifest a higher consciousness. So I'm sorry I'm using words like purified, which may not be a good term to denote the traditional concept of, refining the mind. But the whole idea is that when we use the body in the correct way, then, that transformation that happens in the body has that power to actually, empower our mind to transform and manifest a higher consciousness. So, to put in a nutshell, this is what we mean by body as a kshetra. It has this great potential to prevent you from declining in the quality of your consciousness. So, Ayurveda looks at old age as a people. Dirgha jividam dirgham ayu smritim medha. When you are old, Ayurveda says if you live properly, you have smriti, you have memory. Medha, you have all your cognitive powers preserved. There is no need, don't look at old age, as something in which you are crippled and helpless. Because today we are building shelters for old people. In our tradition, the Vriddhas who lived this life, they were the shelters for the world. They were considered as big trees giving shade for the whole universe. And we know that in our Varnashrama Vyavastha or this Varnashrama Dharma, the fourth stage was old people becoming self-reliant and retiring to a life of contemplation. It's not an age where you are handicapped with Alzheimer's or dementia, or you are living a life of a tamasic life. That's not necessary. So this is a very important point that Ayurveda tells us, that this is all built into this idea of the Chaturashramas, that you have Brahmacharya, Garhastya, Vanaspatya, and sannyasa. Because in that stage, in the stage of sannyasa, you're actually discovering or manifesting a higher consciousness. And your body, Ayurvedic texts tell again and again that in old age, you don't. This is today by modern gerontologists, we are calling this as healthy aging. So if there is one thing that you have to ensure with your body, which you alone are responsible, is that if you don't succeed in aging healthily, then you have messed up with your body. This is the message that I realize. This body is designed for healthy aging, so that at that stage when you are aged, your mind is in a sattvic state, not in a tamasic state. And if you have Alzheimer's, if you have dementia, you're in a tamasic state. So now, when you say kshetra, it's all about understanding that this body is a tool and how to make use of that tool and how to manifest a consciousness using this body as that tool. So the body is the means to perform dharma, which is what Ayurveda says. Health is very essential. And that's why the body is important. Without a healthy body, you cannot achieve the goals of Purushartha. So in Ayurveda, health is only a means to a higher end. And we even define health as a state in which, you are swastha, or you have discovered your inner consciousness. Health is not an end in itself. I mean, if you say you have a clean blood test, so Ayurveda would ask, so what? So what? How long? That state of a clean blood test will not last for even a few hours. Maybe 5 hours later, you do a blood test and everything is gone. So it's so unstable. So the whole idea, Sukha Samtigam Arogyam, have you discovered that inner consciousness? Have you been able to use that, what you call as those physical parameters of health to actually liberate your own mind and consciousness? Otherwise, you are not healthy. So that's the whole idea. And this is what Ayurveda says, is that the body is capable of undergoing a transformation. This is very, very important. Here, this disconnect is not there between consciousness and the body. We don't say that you can neglect the body and then liberate your consciousness. So even the food that you eat, the way you live your life, it affects the quality of your body. The chemistry of your body affects the quality of your consciousness. And today, and this also does not mean that our consciousness is completely under the grip of our chemistry. It is very much possible to transcend this grip of the lower nature. But in the beginning stages, we can see that we are very much dependent on what happens in our body. If there is a sudden surge in adrenaline, your mind will go out of your control. You can be hijacked by your emotions just because of chemical changes in your body. If your sympathetic nervous system becomes active, I mean, your heart will just be pounding, racing. Your stress levels will increase, cortisol will increase. So, this is how the body holds sway over your mind until you tame it. So, when you say you need to tame your emotions, you need to tame the chemistry of your body till you transcend it. And that is actually the idea that we must use the body as a kshetra. Today we know that if you run, for example, if you run, then there are certain chemicals that come into your body, like endocannabinoids, many of the chemicals that give you the good feeling, feeling good emotions, are all dependent on the type of food that you eat, the way you lead your life, your thought processes. So all this becomes the protocol for how you have to use your body. And this is why in Ayurveda we say, Ayurveda tells us that it's like a mirror. It makes you see yourself. And then Ayurveda is also user's manual. It tells you how you have to make use of your tools that are made available for you. And that is where looking at the body as a temple, you say we say that you have started looking at your body as a temple when you really understand its purpose. Otherwise, it cannot become a temple. When you understand the purpose of your body, that is the time you're beginning to look at it as a temple, because now you're using it in the way it should be used. This is what Arjuna says in the Bhagavad Gita also. Karpanya doshobhada swabhava pruchhami tvam dharma sammuta chedaha. Yeah, so there is a question. I think, can I take it at the end, all the questions?
Yeah, all the questions we'll take at the end.
Yeah, because otherwise, this may get interrupted. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. So this is what in Ayurveda means, that when you study the user's manual, how the body should be used, not just in terms of making your body physically fit or going to the gym. That's not in according to Ayurveda. Many wise way. We have seen a lot of people who do this excess gym and focus on too much of muscle development. They can have health problems. They die of sudden heart attacks. Many sports people have this problem. So when you say using the body correctly, it actually means, bringing out all the chemical changes, physical changes, transformations that are necessary, that will change the quality of your consciousness. Only then you can say that you are using your body in the right way. Then you are treating your body as a temple. And since we do not know this, it's difficult to cultivate this habit, the body was used to inspire the external temple so that we can train ourselves on how to use our body correctly. So in my understanding and from the Ayurvedic perspective, what is the purpose of going to a temple? There is no magical God sitting there to grant all your boons. You go there and surrender or put some money, it's not going to solve your problems. The whole process of going to the temple is to learn how to enter into your own inner being. It's just an enactment. You are acting out, you are rehearsing what you should actually be doing, with your own inner consciousness. You do it in your own body. So every day when you say you're going to the temple, it is to make you, you do all the process. When you go there, you remove your chapels, you remove your shirt. In Indian temples, many rituals are there, and people don't understand what it all means. It is to create that sense of withdrawal, that you are withdrawing into yourself. You're disconnecting from the external world. That is why the temple is having a certain atmosphere. So the whole idea of visiting a temple is to learn how to do this journey to your inner consciousness. So discover this process of discovering the inner consciousness at the core of one's being is what we call as an inner journey. And the temple is the school where we learn the basic lessons of how to initiate and complete this inner journey. So there are two terms used in Ayurveda. This has come from the Vedic tradition also. Pravritti, or the outer life, and Nivritti, or the inner life. And Ayurveda says that this whole protocol, because we don't have much time, I'm just summing up this whole protocol in Ayurveda, is that you have to engage. There is no way you can suddenly withdraw, because that is very dangerous. I mean, you will be lost neither to the external or the internal world. You'll be lost in between. So this is the whole idea of a balanced life, is that you engage with the external world. You have that outward movement called nivritti, but the nivritti, the pravritti that leads you into nivritti. You must lead a life of pravritti that will naturally bring you to nivritti, or the life of contemplation or introversion. And that's what the temple is teaching us. How to live an external life that will not make you lost in the external world, but that will make you, turn inside. The turning point is, when you turn back inside, when you have that introversion, and this has to happen very naturally. And this is the big moment when you turn inside, when that transformation happens. And that temple is that sacred place where this is facilitated. The temple was the place for all the arts, all the fine sciences. It was a process of refining the individual so that they go from a life of pravritti to a life of nivritti. And this is the whole process. And so this nivritti eventually leads to the discovery of an inner consciousness, of inner consciousness as the basis of existence of the individual as well as the entire creation. So now if you look at Kshetra as the temple, this is why I wanted to tell in the beginning itself, that Kshetra as a temple is only a representation of the human body. It's a human body which was there first, not the temple first. And it's also very important that you must understand the whole principle of the temple to be able to benefit from it. Otherwise it just serves the purpose of a psychological, relief, that when you are stressed, you go to the temple and do something, you come back psychologically calm. So it's just like an anxiety medicine. That's not the purpose of the true temple. That the purpose of the true temple is to kindle that whole process of transformation in our own inner beings through the external, rituals that we do in the temple. So the very architecture of the Kshetra or temple is a representation of the human body and its inner layers. So the temple is sacred because the human body is sacred. We don't have to say that, the body should be considered as a sacred temple. The body is the most sacred thing, that we are encountering in our existence. And the external temple is just a reminder that our own body is actually sacred. So it would be wrong to say that the body is a temple. Rather, we should say the temple is our body. The temple that we see is our body. See, it is to remind us what our body is, that we have the external temple. And whatever we do in the temple is an enactment of what we should do with our own bodies, with our own inner being in our journey of spiritual transformation. So here is a very simple representation. This is a big science in itself, and I don't want to go into all those details. If you look at the whole temple, you can see it is the Purusha. And that is the reason why we are entering into our own body. We are entering into the body of the Purusha. And that is why in temples we are said to remove our slippers. Because just like when we enter home, we don't need a slipper. A slipper is an indication that we are going out, into the external world. When we go out our homes, we put our slippers. When we are going inside, we don't need slippers. So there is nothing, dogmatic about this. It's not a simple ritual. It's a symbolism. Every single temple ritual has this meaning. It's trying to put you into a state of introversion, into a state of contemplation. So when you enter into the temple, you remove your slippers, chappals, in the same spirit that you do it when you enter into your home. So you're back home now. You're entering into your own divine abode. That is a feeling that is given. And you move slowly through the external structures from the Sthula Sharira to the Sukshma Sharira to the Karana Sharira. And even the Dvaja Stamba, these are all representing the Shat Chakra, Sahasrara. The whole process of entering into the temple is, a process of traveling up even your spine, for the union of Shiva and Shakti. So what is happening inside is what we are enacting. And I want to say, in India, a lot of temples, have images of sexual acts on the outside walls. And this is sometimes, why should a temple have this? And what the real meaning is that this is, or it's only on the outside that you can see such images, because that is the biological body. And when you enter into the temple, you are being told that you are leaving all that outside and you are going inside. So the whole idea is not to, many people say it is to make the whole act of sex divine. That is why we have put it in the temple. That's not the reason. Where it is put is a physical body. That is the place where we feel all these, sensual urges and all that. And when you enter into the temple, you are transcending it. You're going much deeper. You're moving away from Mooladhara and Swatisthana to your higher chakras. So all your sexual tendencies, it's nothing wrong. It is considered that it's very biological. It is natural. It is part of your physical body. As long as you're clinging to your physical body, as long as your consciousness is centered on your physical body, you cannot transcend these urges. That's what it means. So if you go deep into each and every aspect of the temple experience, and this is exactly what Ayurveda also talks about. Ayurveda says that in order to, what should happen to our mind in order to manifest a higher consciousness is, according to Ayurveda, elimination of the ragadi rogas, that is emotional turbulences of the mind. When you get excited or depressed when we respond to our experiences in life and when they disturb us, that is what prevents that inner consciousness from manifesting. So the message of the temple is very simple. And this is what Ayurveda is also talking about. And this is the idea of prasada. Prasada means whatever action you do, the result that you get is prasada. Whether it is good or it is bad, if you throw a ball up into the air, it comes down and you cannot do anything about it. You have control only in throwing the ball up. But what comes down is a result of your action, and that result is always prasadam because it comes from the universe. And there is no, whatever you get from the temple, you take it as a prasadam and come out. So you have gone inside, you have gone into the deeper layers of your own inner being, and you come out with training your mind to accept all experiences in life as prasadam. And you go through that learning curve. So every time you do an action, you may do the right thing and you get the right action. If you do a wrong thing, you get the wrong action. But there's no way. If you want the right result, you must do the right action. You have to learn. And you are able to go through this process of self-learning with mental equanimity. And as your mind calms down, this state of a calm mind is what is called prasadam actually. This is clearly mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. Ragadvesha viyuktaistu vishayan indriyaischaran atmavashyehi videyatma prasadamati gacchati. If you are able to engage in the activities of your life without mental turbulence, with equanimity, you are in a process of learning. When you accept every result that comes in your life as a manifestation of the cosmic law, I put my hand in fire, it burned. I cannot blame the fire. That's the nature of the fire. If I know that if I put my hand in fire, the consequences that my hand will be burnt. So my action gets modified. So life becomes a process of learning and unraveling a higher consciousness. So this is the purpose of a temple. And that purpose of a temple, that whole architecture of a temple is defined by the idea of what the human body is. As explained in Ayurveda, as explained in many other Shastras, But in Ayurveda, there is this special attention to the body and the body as a tool for liberation. Sometimes this idea is lost in the other spiritual traditions because of excess asceticism and excess denial of, this physical world. Whereas in Ayurveda, we don't deny this physical world also. We don't deny the world of sensory experiences because even that, we say, is a tool for self-transformation. We need the Pravritti Marga to get into Nivritti. So embracing both these worlds together, like in the Upanishad, they say, Andham tama pravishyati ya vidyam upasate. Andham tama pravisadiya avidyam upasade. If you reject the body, you enter into utter darkness. If you reject yourself, then you also enter into utter darkness. And when you embrace both, avidya mrutyum tirtva, vidya amritam ashnute. When you embrace both as one unity, then you overcome the limitations of the body and realize your inner being as a higher consciousness. It is one continuum. The body is not to be rejected. The body is to be accepted, to be used as a tool for transformation. And that is what makes it sacred. And that is why the temple is inspired by the body. And that is why the temple became sacred, because the body is a sacred tool for self-transformation. And this is the Ayurvedic idea of the body and how the body inspired the construction of the external temple. So I thought we can have about 10 minutes for discussion. And so let me stop here. There are some questions also. So
thank you, Rammanohar, very much for this beautiful presentation of the body as a temple. And I'm sure that is very much in the line of integral yoga, and so which you also follow, and Sri Aurobindo's view and the mother's view, and the whole topic what we are kind of addressing today is the transformation of the body. That the body is the purpose. Actually, as Sri Aurobindo says, that the soul is here to do the work for the body, and in a way. And the body is to be transformed and to become more and more suitable instrument for the spirit.
exactly.
And yes, and we have several questions here for you. They are all listed here. And if you want to, I can read them, that people also will hear them, and then you may answer them one by
Okay.
one.
Yes. So
Okay, the first one, I will start from the bottom. How will change in consciousness manifest in a physical form according to Ayurveda? What are some of the physical indications that consciousness is growing?
yeah, according to Ayurveda, the biggest sign of the manifestation of a higher consciousness is empathy. Your ability to look at the whole universe as your own self. There is nothing magical. It is an inner change. Of course, Ayurveda talks about many other transformations that can happen in the way of this journey. But the real essence is that when we experience that this whole universe is one undivided consciousness, and that Ayurveda says is possible to experience in the body itself. And that is when the body is able to do its dharma, when this awareness manifests, which is actually the transformation which we are awaiting to happen. So in Charaka Samhita, it is said, Sarvalokam Atmani, Atmanam cha Sarvaloke, Samam Anupashyata, Satya Buddhi Samuktati. When the individual is able to see the whole world in oneself and oneself in the whole world, which is an experience, it's not a concept. You feel it. That is the true sign of consciousness. When the pain of another person is experienced as your own pain, know that the higher consciousness is manifested. When you can feel the entire pulsations of the universe as your own pulsations, only then consciousness, you have awakened that inner consciousness. It is of the nature of karuna, karunyam, or the ultimate empathy or love, or whatever we call that. I mean, that I found also quite fascinating, because it's something that makes it's something that happens at a very deep and inner level. This doesn't make your cells immortal. Ayurveda says, "Na jadu kaschidamara prativyam jayade." Even if you manifest a higher consciousness, it doesn't mean that you may live. You may extend your life, but how long? Because time will ultimately catch up. So the Charaka Samhita is also very realistic here. It says that you can have a healthy old life, but not an eternal life on this earth. So the first chapter of Taraka Samhita is Dirghan Jividiyam. Can I have a long life? Not an eternal life. Nowhere has Ayurveda asked for an eternal life, but just long enough so that this transformation can be complete and I can manifest through my body what is the purpose of that consciousness and transmit it to others. And this is the parampara. This is what Ayurveda calls as the transmission of the greatest knowledge. It's not some intellectual knowledge, but this spark of that inner consciousness, which is transmitted from the guru to the shishya, and then it continues. If that spark is gone, the whole evolution of the human race is destroyed, because if we lose the purpose of that higher consciousness.
Thank you. So there is another question. Can you elaborate on the divine Shakti in this process? Do you have the concept of the divine Shakti?
Yeah, you know, I made a passing mention of Purusha and Prakriti, and which is a very foundational concept in Ayurveda. And Prakriti is the creation, the Shakti. It is not in the sense of feminine or masculine in terms of gender, because this Prakriti and Purusha are there in both males and females. And Prakriti is the witness, and Purusha is the witness, and Prakriti is the Shakti. Shakti means that which has the power of being and becoming, of whole transformation. That is why Shakti is considered as the power of self-transformation. That is why the body is a manifestation of Shakti, because it's the power of being and becoming. The Purusha is unchanging. It just, when the Shakti, the Prakriti changes, evolves, manifests, and we call that Prakriti and Vikaras, through that whole process of Vikara, which is what evolution is all about in Sankhya. You know, the Mahabhutas, Ahankaras, and then when that complete unfolding or evolution of Prakriti happens, then the Purusha is able to manifest. So the Purusha's manifestation is completely dependent on the Shakti or Prakriti. So it is for the sake of Purusha that Prakriti exists, or to manifest Purusha. Or we say that is why the Prakriti is considered as a mother, because the Purusha that is in a potential form inside the womb of Prakriti is being given birth to. Mayadhyakshena Prakriti Suyadesa Characharam. In my presiding presence, the Prakriti gives birth to all living beings and manifests that higher consciousness. So that is the general idea of Shakti, and that both man and woman are half male and half female. Gender is only with the body. And that's another important thing. When you look at the kshetra, we transcend gender, because at the level of the mind, we are male and female. At the body level, we may be male or female. At the level of the mind, we are always male and female. And beyond, at the level of the self, we are neither male nor female. So we have all these contradictions in our own being. And this is the way we can escape gender, because at the physical level, there is no gender equality. At the mental level, there is gender equality. When the male awakens the female in him and the female awakens the male in her, then gender equality is established. You know, I become complete. I'm now both male and female. But if I try to change my body, I become neither. And then, I become a eunuch. I become neither male nor female. At the physical body, we need to maintain our gender identity. At the mental level, we need to find the harmony. And at the spiritual level, we transcend this, because we go beyond gender. So that is the whole idea of Shakti. And of course, we have so many ways in which it can be explained. But I hope I was able to just convey the essence of the thinking in Ayurveda.
Thank you. Thank you. There is one more question. Why Ayurvedic medicine do not go through extensive scientific research, and in the absence of scientific research, what is the basis of sure shot for cure? Are there Ayurvedic vaccine that can be free from side effects? You partially answered it before the seminar. Yes.
Anyway, there are many questions here also. One, why Ayurvedic medicine does not go through extensive scientific research? Two answers. One is no funding. Very few funds are available. And this started from the colonial period. In India today, we have maybe 4 or 5% of the whole healthcare budget allocated for the entire Ayush systems, and only a fraction. Now, compared to modern medicine, where pharma companies and even governments spend, I think, billions and billions of dollars to promote research, and still we don't have evidence for many things, including the vaccine. In spite of such heavy spending and such heavy investment, it's a miracle that and wonder that Ayurveda is still surviving and convincing a lot of people with very little investment in research and money. So, one reason is, of course, no adequate funding. Research is expensive. And if you want to publish an article, nowadays journals are very expensive. In India, it's very difficult, $2,000, $3,000 to publish a paper. And, we will have to sell our homes and our entire life savings to publish one paper. So we don't find so many papers, because in the West, this is a whole network. You have projects that fund for, publishing papers. There are pharma companies. The whole thing is, an ecosystem. Ayurveda is not into that ecosystem. So even when good research is done, sometimes it's difficult to publish. The third thing, the second reason apart from the money is that, modern methods of research are not suitable for Ayurveda. And we have not developed alternatives. In Ayurveda, we have a whole system approach where you are not giving one drug and treating a patient. All modern studies are designed to test one drug so that a pharma company can sell it. A randomized controlled trial, where one drug is expected to work on everybody. So you try it on 1,000 people and then say now it is going to work on all the billion people on earth. So, you translate it. But when it's actually in the market, a lot of problems come and then you have to withdraw it. This cycle goes on. But there are also a lot of successful medicines that modern science has created. And here I also like to point out, it's not a question of Ayurveda versus modern medicine. It's a question of Ayurveda and modern medicine. What one cannot achieve, if the other can, will be all the more richer if you have an integrated approach. I think that's true for the entire human experience. It's not a question of Hinduism versus Christianity or Indian culture versus Chinese culture. It's a question of how all of us together can make the world and our experience more enriched. We all go through specific experiences in specific environments, and we have to share that with the rest of the world, and we fill our gaps. And I think that's how humanity evolves. So the biggest challenge is that we are not developing integrative approaches. So Ayurveda is always being tested to check whether it's better than modern medicine, or tested in the same method. So that's why that doesn't happen. And of course, when there is no scientific research, one thing is that in Ayurveda, we already have a lot of evidence for certain diseases because Ayurveda has been in existence for thousands of years. Only thing is that evidence is not in a form that we can understand. The codified text of Ayurveda has compiled centuries of experience. So they are also a kind of evidence. We have to decipher and present it in a way that we can understand today. And the good news is that Ayurveda tells us, good news in the sense it's good and bad. Good news is that Ayurveda is honest. It says that all diseases are not curable. So there's not a sure cure for every disease. Many diseases can only be managed. Many diseases. So where Ayurveda tells Sukha Sadhan, easy to manage, some diseases difficult to manage. Some diseases you can only, give palliative care, and some diseases you cannot do anything. So Ayurveda already has such a classification. So where we are sure that it works, it is still working even today. I mean, you can come to India and see some of the best centers. If clinicians, there are honest clinicians, they are also referring patients to Western doctors when it is required. And I think Ayurveda will benefit from, if we bring in more research and funding and develop appropriate methods and develop cooperation with modern medical doctors, plan for an integrative system of medicine, we'll be in a better position to take informed decisions. From this question, I understand today it's very difficult to take informed decisions. because there's so many medical systems, we don't know which one is true. And it's mostly the Ayurveda, the allopathic system, which is more, well equipped to show data and evidence.
Mhm. Thank you.
Yeah.
You see,
Yeah.
this is quite interesting because you addressed this before the seminar that Ayurveda addresses the host, and it strengthened our system, regardless to what is the interaction with the outer world. And
Yes.
in this sense, you can see that there is a tendency in the world today, more and more vitamins to support the system, to support the holistic, the immune system. It is becoming more and more evident that it is kind of shifting towards the principle of Ayurveda more than allopathic medicine, though it is also available and necessary, as you rightly said. There is one more question about the transformation of the cells in the mother, agenda. If you thought about this, mother speaks about
Yeah.
transformation of the physical body and especially the mind of cells.
Yes. That I can just tell what is there in Ayurveda because that is our focus today. Ayurveda calls this, it doesn't use the word cell, but it uses the term dhatus. Dhatus are, the sum and substance of what makes up our body. Dhatu means that which supports. So the food that we eat gets transformed into 7 dhatus, and that supports the structure of the body. So this dhatus attaining a certain state of quality, according to Ayurveda, is very essential for us to be able to manifest a higher consciousness. And this is what Ayurveda calls as a rasayana. Rasa means, the ayana means the path, or rasa is the food that we eat. So what Ayurveda says is that when the rasa is completely transformed through the dhatus, it produces an energy what we call as ojas. This term is called as ojas, which almost looks like the energy that today we may say that is produced by the cells. That because the consciousness, the body should be prepared to hold the consciousness. And this is what we see in the temple also. You do all these rituals to prepare the stone in a certain dimension so that it can hold that Chaitanya. And when you say the dhatus have to transform, and that is why Ayurveda says eating your food is a prayer. Taking care of your dhatu is a prayer, because through every act that you do, you're inviting that higher consciousness to manifest through your being. And unless you transform your dhatus, this is called as dhatu samyam or shasta dhatus, having the dhatus of the highest quality, which liberates this energy called ojas. We could also study this from modern viewpoint, but I'm still, that's not a very familiar terrain for me. I understand that there are many studies which are showing that if you lead a certain way of life, if you are not stressed, so many genetic and other changes are happening. But these all studies are just in the beginning. But in Ayurveda, there is this clear concept that your dhatus need to be, of a very high quality, which we can translate as, cells having very high potency. And then these dhatus, what Ayurveda says is, just like the bees collect honey from different flowers and create the honey, even so, this is the harvest of metabolism that the body has to take from all the dhatus, this honey called ojas, which then empowers your mind and makes you capable of manifesting a higher consciousness. This is the best answer that I can give from the Ayurvedic perspective. That concept is there, but it's science in terms of molecular biology and all that is still not undeciphered. Not deciphered yet. Sorry.
Yeah, I have a question that's fairly a practical one for you. It seems that each generation we see living longer in life, despite pollution all around us, despite the stress that's coming from trying to juggle the family and the work, social life. We see fast foods becoming predominant, at least here in the U.S. And yet, myself and others have family members that are living well into their 90s. So I wonder if there's something more that's going on behind the scenes, despite this life and despite vitamins and other ways that we've tried to support, and even this lack of exercise as you get older. What, from your personal opinion and idea, might be happening? Why are we seeing? And it's got to be more than just. It seems to me, has to be more than just an advancement in the medical system and medicines and prolonging life. Seems like there's something else at work. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I didn't really completely get, I think I got lost a little bit. You were saying about, in spite of all this pollution and
lifestyle. Despite the lifestyle and pollution and fast foods, and even despite medical, even though we have medical advances, there seems to be something else going on that is prolonging life with each generation.
You mean, see, there is one thing. Ayurveda has never said that prolonging life is a big deal, because in our tradition, it was the Asuras who had actually long lives, much longer. They wouldn't die. It's very difficult to kill an Asura. And so the Ayurvedic idea of health is not related to longevity. That's one thing. So you may transform yourself into Asura, becoming a burden to the earth, and you live long. And, it's very much possible. And Asuras also had such a lifestyle, they were eating whatever they wanted, making merry, harming nature, harming people, but they still got away with it. So I don't want to put it so bluntly, but our Puranas would say there is an Asuric culture emerging. And this is a burden for Mother Earth. And the second thing is that, lifespan and health span are different. You may live long, but the question is whether your health span. Longevity does not always guarantee also long health span. And when you look at health span, there are two things. One is physically you may be healthy, but if you're not mentally balanced, that's built into the definition of Ayurveda. You're healthy when you have this overall balance. And that is why in our tradition, there is this story, a couple who wanted a coupleless child, they pray to Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva comes into their dream and asks, I can grant you your boon, but you have to make a choice. I'm sorry. Do you want a child that lives long, but is a dullard? Or a child that's very intelligent, but very short-lived? Now, Shiva puts the couple into a lot of trouble. They think a lot, and then they say, we choose the short-lived child, who is intelligent, not a dullard who lives long or who is a burden to this earth. Now, this is the whole perspective of Ayurveda. Even if you live for a short while, it should be a life of self-transformation, where you bring that spark of inner consciousness. Otherwise, your life is a waste.
Sure.
And you can live an Asuric life. You can live for centuries. And we have in the Mahabharata the story of Yayati, who borrowed the youthhood of his own children and lived long. And finally, the question comes, then what? And that's that point when you say, then what, is when this whole inner journey begins. So I think that is what is lacking in today's world. We may achieve immortality to a great extent. I know that in the US, dead bodies are preserved. People are preserving dead bodies with so much of investment, with the hope that one day there will be the technology to bring people back to life, and then they shouldn't lose it. So there is a service, people who are, preserved in that way. So I think science will teach us all those things. We are still waiting to see many, many wonderful technologies coming up. But still, it will not bring us that, that transformation of our inner consciousness, which changes, brings that deeper peace and tranquility and purpose in our lives. And that's what spirituality is all about. And that's what Ayurveda is.
Sure. Thank you. There is a question that was in the chat box. Can I get a reference of the book, where I can get the book that you've written? Is there a book that you've written that's available for folks?
No, not yet.
Okay.
This topic these are all based on books in Ayurveda, but the thing is, I'm just interpreting it based on my own experience and reading of the text. Maybe it would be a good idea to also write it down but so far I have not been able to. Mostly these are in the form of talks, or maybe, and even, the articles that I've written are mostly research articles, because that has also become part of this game today for, survival and for the science to be accepted. So unfortunately, most of our writing time is spent on writing these research articles for journals where they're not interested in these topics also. So these are all dismissed as philosophy. And so, yeah. So I'm sorry about that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this wonderful talk. And we are very, very delighted always to have a meeting with you and to listen about this kind of ancient Ayurvedic tradition. And I hope one day world will become more and more Ayurvedic. The force of life would be in properly used with knowledge, with light of knowledge in the body, and body as a temple will reveal all the wonders of the spirit. Thank you, and
Thank you very much.
wish we will meet again. I'm sure about this.
Namaste. It was a great
Namaste.
pleasure.
Thank you all.